It's not a dream. Only it's the...
Imagine you in a cabin in a camp working in a remote Canadian mining town, and there's something terrifying there and everything, and you don't know what it is.
Have you ever wanted
So
to
that's
see
what
your
the video we're going to be doing today. Basically, this video takes place in Canada, a mining town, and everything, and something weird is going on and attacking people, and people going disappearing, and they do not know what it is. But let's go ahead and get into the video, shall we? Enjoy.
Thing with the vibrations, not what happened to Gerald, not the sound I heard rising through the floor of the access room on the last night. The core sample was the first thing, pulled from 400 meters below the surface of northeastern British Columbia, containing something that had no business being inside 4,000-year-old rock. If any of us had known then how to read what it was telling us, 6 men might have walked out of that camp at the end of their contract instead of 3. My name is Roy Pierce. What I am about to tell you was recorded in the spring of 1974 in a kitchen in Prince George, British Columbia, by a journalist named Mrs. Helen Rourke of the Vancouver province, who found my name in a sealed insurance claim filed by the Athabasca Copper Company in February of 1962. She is the third person to ask me about Camp 7 in 13 years, and the first I agreed to speak to, because the previous 2 were working for the company, and what they wanted was not information. What Mrs. Rourke wants is a record. I have no objection to a record. I will tell you about Camp 7 in the order things happened, because that is the only way I know how to make a person understand why we did what we did. It is easy, looking back from the outside, to wonder why no one acted differently at various moments. I wonder that myself. What I have come to understand is that each decision made sense at the time based on what we knew, and that what we knew at each moment was always exactly 1 step behind what was actually happening to us. That gap of 1 step is what I want to explain. I was 34 years old in the autumn of 1961. I had been a contract driller since I was 19, which meant 15 years underground across 6 provinces. I had worked in hard rock and soft rock, and ground that did not behave like either. I had worked in mines that smelled of copper, and mines that smelled of sulfur, and one mine in northern Quebec that had no smell at all, which the older men said was a bad sign. They were right. That site flooded in under 2 weeks. My particular skill was reading the sounds a mine makes, the way rock shifts and resettles, the way water moves through a seam, the difference between the sound of a tunnel breathing and the sound of a tunnel under stress. This is not something you are told. It is something you accumulate over years of paying attention when you are underground, and your life depends on what you hear. I mention this because I want you to understand what kind of witness I am. I am not a man inclined toward imagination in professional settings. I am a man who has spent 15 years underground, distinguishing between what belongs to a mine and what does not. What I encountered at Camp 7 did not belong. I knew this before I had language for it, and what I am giving you now is my attempt to set down in order the sequence of things that led to that knowledge. The Athabasca Copper Company's Camp 7 was established on a cleared plateau approximately 53 kilometers north of Fort Nelson in northeastern British Columbia. Fort Nelson is not a large town. In 1961, it was accessible primarily by a road that held for heavy trucks about 7 months of the year, and by snowmobile or aircraft for the remainder. The drilling site had been selected because a preliminary survey in the spring of 1961 identified a promising copper vein in the basalt below the plateau, running at an estimated depth of 180 to 220 meters. The company wanted to know how deep the vein went and how much copper it contained, and for that they needed a deep drilling operation with a crew capable of sustained work through the winter. The camp itself was functional and nothing more. 6 prefabricated structures moved in over the summer, 2 bunkhouses that slept 4 men each, a cookhouse with a combined generator room, a supply shed, a geologist's hut, and the shaft housing. The shaft housing was the largest structure, a corrugated steel and timber frame building, approximately 12 meters by 8 meters, built directly over the primary drill site. The generator ran on diesel and provided power to all structures through a cable system strung on wooden poles between the buildings. There was a radio in the cookhouse for communication with the company's Fort Nelson office. There was a road of sorts connecting the camp to the main supply route, passable to snowmobiles and to the company's supply truck, which made the run approximately every 8 to 10 days. The surrounding landscape was black spruce boreal, the kind of forest that does not open up or allow light even in summer. By mid-October, when my crew arrived, the light was gone well before 5 in the afternoon, and the temperature was sitting at -22 by day. The plateau had been cleared to create the camp footprint, but the forest pressed in on 3 sides within 20 meters of the outermost buildings, and the 4th side was a rock face, approximately 30 meters high, that blocked the prevailing northern wind. The camp therefore sat in a cold pocket, where the air was still even when the surrounding trees moved. I noticed on the first day that the camp was quiet in a way that was different from camps I had worked before. Every northern camp I have been in has its ambient wildlife, whiskey jacks, gray jays, ravens working the edges of the clearing, camp followers. They are reliable enough that experienced crews treat their absence as a signal. At Camp 7 there were no birds. There were no sounds from the forest that I could attribute to any animal. The only sounds were the diesel generator and the crunch of boots on frozen ground, and our own voices. I mentioned this to Vince Callan on the first evening. He had noticed it too. He said it was probably because we were in dense enough cover that most wildlife had already moved south. He said it in the tone of a man who is trying to convince himself rather than the other person. I let it rest. There was no productive alternative on day 1. The crew. Vince Callan was 51 years old that autumn. He had started underground in the Cape Breton coal mines as a young man and had worked his way west over 30 years, picking up hard rock credentials along the way. He was not a large man, but he was a dense one, with the kind of muscular economy that comes from a lifetime of physical work in confined spaces. He did not talk much on the job, but when he talked off it, he talked at considerable length and with considerable specificity. And his opinions on Athabasca Copper's management decisions were not endorsements. He had taken this contract because the pay was good, and because he had been between jobs since August and had a daughter in school in Kamloops whose tuition he was covering. Vince was skeptical by professional temperament. He did not believe things without evidence, and when evidence arrived, he examined it carefully before concluding anything. I respected this about him. Later, when Vince began pressing us to leave Camp 7, I thought about this characteristic and concluded that if Vince Callan was frightened by something,
This game does not have energy.
the thing in question was genuinely frightening. Tommy Egan was 26 and on his 3rd contract since completing his drilling certification. He was from Sault Ste. Marie originally, and he had the particular quality of young workers who are technically excellent before experience has fully installed the caution that accompanies that excellence. He was good inside a drill cab. He had good hands and good ears, and he could read what the rock was doing through the controls in a way that takes most drillers years to develop. He was also the kind of person who fills a space with energy, who makes a camp feel occupied rather than merely staffed. When Tommy was present in the cookhouse at a meal, the conversation was different than when he was not. I mention this because later, when he was not there, the silence in the cookhouse was a particular kind of silence. The foreman was Gerald Mackay. I have told you something about him already, and I want to add one specific thing, because it becomes important before this account is finished. Gerald had a habit that every crew he ever ran came to rely on. When he finished an inspection of a tunnel section, he was always the last man to leave. Always. He checked each man out before he followed. He had done this for so long it was automatic, and his men came to expect it as a guarantee. Nobody left a Gerald Mackay tunnel without Gerald having confirmed you were clear. I had worked under him twice before, and I had noted this habit and found it admirable. By the last night at Camp 7, I had a different feeling about it. Dr. Peter Ashford was the company geologist assigned to the site. He was 43, his doctorate from Queen's, 4 years with Athabasca Copper, following a decade in university research. He was not what I would call an outdoorsman. He dressed adequately for the cold, but moved through it carefully, as though the environment were an obstacle to his work, rather than a component of it. He kept meticulous records in a system of labeled folders that he organized and reorganized each evening in his hut. I did not dislike Ashford. I found him efficient and honest in his assessments. What I found difficult was his certainty, which was not the earned certainty of someone who has tested beliefs against difficult conditions, but the inherited certainty of someone who has always worked in environments where their expertise is the primary tool. By the end of our time at Camp 7, that certainty was gone. He was emptied of it. I have thought about whether that was a loss or a correction. In addition to Vince, Tommy, Gerald, Ashford, and myself, the camp included 2 crew hands who had been at the site since August. I will call them Harris and Dubois. They handled equipment and assisted with rigging, and performed whatever tasks the foreman assigned. They had seen the camp in its earlier stages, and knew the site and its quirks. I will come back to them. The work and the sounds. The first week of deep drilling was the kind of hard routine that settles a crew into its own rhythms. You get up before light, you eat, you go underground, and for the first few days the sounds of the drill and the rock and your own labor are the whole world. After a few days, these sounds become so familiar, they stop registering as individual things and become a kind of texture, a background against which anything unusual will stand out immediately. The sounds of drilling at depth are specific, and I want to describe them carefully. The bit rotation produces a continuous, low-pitched grinding that transmits through the drill string, through the drive head, through the housing frame, and into the rock walls of the tunnel. It is felt as much as heard, a vibration that enters through the soles of your boots and travels up through your legs and settles in your chest as a kind of pressure. The hydraulic systems of the drive unit produce a higher-pitched cycling sound, a rhythmic hiss and clunk of pressure, applied and released. Water flush used in the drilling produces a constant rushing sound in the drill rod. The cores coming up produce a muffled change in the bit's tone as it transitions between rock types, a slightly different pitch when it crosses a seam or finds a pocket. In addition to these operational sounds, a tunnel at depth has its own sounds. Water seeping through cracks produces a variety of drips and trickles that change with temperature and pressure. Rock under stress settles and shifts, producing sounds ranging from faint ticks to occasional sharp cracks, all of which are normal and none of which indicate instability unless they cluster or increase. The heating and cooling of surface structures produces sounds that transmit down into the upper sections of the shaft, particularly with a generator running on a cold night. These are the sounds I had spent 15 years cataloging. I could identify each of them and locate their source and tell you whether they were consistent with normal operating conditions. On the second morning, during a break in the drilling, I heard something I could not identify. The drill had been shut down for a bit inspection. The tunnel at the 180-meter level was quiet. The sounds I expected in that silence were,
I just got paid $62,000 for my car accident using nothing but this app on my phone.
If you've never heard of free case evals, it's quickly becoming one of the largest legal help platforms in the country for car crash victims. They built this tool that's already helped over 140,000 people get life-changing settlement checks, all from just answering a few questions. Here's how it works. The app asks 4 simple questions about your accident. Then it compares your case to millions of others. In seconds, it tells you whether you qualify for a big cash payout. I first found out about this from a guy named Raymond about 3 years ago. Raymond got hit hard in a bad crash. He lost his car, was dealing with serious pain, and the insurance company refused to pay him anything fair. So he posted a video that went viral, sharing how he used this exact tool and got a $125,000 payout in just a few months. Then it happened to me. I was stopped at a red light when some distracted driver slammed into the back of my car. I messed up my back, my car was totaled, and worst of all, I lost my job because I had no way to get to work. Luckily, I remembered Raymond's video. I clicked the same link he used, answered the 4 questions, and boom, it said I qualified. Fast forward just 60 days and I had this check in my hands. It helped me replace my income, pay off debt, and get a new ride. Then I shared this tool on my own social media and my friend Jasmine used it. She ended up getting $147,000. I also told my buddy Eli, who had been in a wreck the week before. He was skeptical, but he gave it a shot and got $178,000. What I love most is how beginner friendly it is. You don't need to know anything about the law. Just click the link, answer 4 questions, and in seconds it tells you what you might qualify for. And if your case qualifies, you get connected to a free case eval specialist who handles everything. No fees up front, no court dates, no stress. A few years ago, I had no idea what to do after a car accident. I probably would have just hired some random attorney and hoped for the best. And we all know how that usually goes. But now I know better. And I'm glad I saw Raymond's video when I did. Jasmine is terrible with tech, and even she ended up getting a 6-figure payout. Eli? He was offered just $6,000 by insurance, but ended up walking away with $178,000. That's $172,000 more without ever talking to the insurance company again. So yeah, this is for anyone who's been injured in a car accident. Just click the link below, answer 4 quick questions, and see if your case qualifies for a major settlement. Just like I did. If you qualify, the team at Free Case Evals handles everything for you. You don't pay a dime unless you win. Thousands of people, like me, Raymond, Jasmine, and Eli, have already used this and gotten huge payouts. Imagine that moment when you check your account and see tens of thousands hit it out of nowhere. That's the power of this tool, so don't wait. Click the link, answer 4 questions, and see how much your accident might be worth. And please, share this with your friends and family who've been injured too. They deserve...
The distant generator, the drip of groundwater in the lower section, the occasional tick of rock resettling. What I heard was additional to these, a low resonance, coming from below rather than from any identifiable point in the tunnel, continuous for approximately 10 seconds, and then absent. Not loud, not alarming by itself, but it did not match any source I could account for. I catalogued it and returned to the support check. Over the following 6 days, I heard this resonance 3 more times, always during periods when the drill was not running. It was consistent in pitch and character each time. I formed the hypothesis that it was a geological phenomenon. Certain rock formations under certain temperature and pressure conditions can produce low-frequency resonances caused by gas movement through porous material or by differential thermal expansion of adjacent rock types. I had never personally encountered such a phenomenon in exactly this form, but I was aware of accounts of similar sounds from other deep drilling sites. I was not troubled by it. Vince mentioned it to me on the 5th morning without my having prompted him. He said he had heard something he could not attribute and asked if I had too. I told him my hypothesis. He considered it and said he thought I was probably right. He said it in the tone of a man who is not certain he thinks anything is right. Harris said he had heard it once, early on the 4th day, and had not mentioned it because he did not know what to make of it. Dubois said nothing. Tommy had not heard it, which I later understood was because his cab position in the drive unit put him closest to the operational sounds and likely masked lower frequency inputs that were more perceptible farther from the equipment. At no point during this first week did the resonance strike me as evidence of anything other than an unusual geological condition. I want to be clear about this, because I know there is a temptation to read significance back into the beginning of an account when you know how the account ends. We did not know at the time. We knew what we knew when we knew it. The void and the core sample. On the 9th day, at 412 meters depth, the drill bit dropped. This event has a specific sound I can describe exactly. The rotation pitch of the bit rises slightly as contact resistance drops. Then there is a brief period of freefall registering as a sudden absence of torque feedback in the drive system. Then the bit catches the far wall of the void, and the pitch returns to normal within a fraction of a second. The whole event takes less than 2 seconds. Tommy had the drive shut down within 3 seconds of the bit catching. We pulled the string to inspect the bit, undamaged. No unusual scoring, no metal fatigue at the tips, nothing indicating it had encountered anything harder or softer than the surrounding basalt. This was what I expected. A void in that geology is not unusual, and would not damage a bit at our operating RPM. Ashford came in from his hut when we cut the drive, which meant he had been monitoring our operational sounds from outside, which was not unusual for him.
I like them a lot.
Ashford examined the bit and agreed it was undamaged. He asked for the depth log for the void. Gerald made the entry himself and read it back. 412 meters. 60 centimeters. Bit undamaged. Contact with far side confirmed. No evidence of lateral extension. Ashford said voids at that depth were not remarkable and could be caused by a gas pocket, a dissolution cavity in the rock matrix, or a pre-existing fracture system. He said we should log the void and continue drilling into the far side to assess rock quality below it. We pulled the core from the run that had ended at the upper edge of the void before we continued. Standard procedure. You examine what you pulled before you drill further. Tommy extracted the core barrel and handed it to Ashford, who set it on his examination board and began the standard process of cracking the barrel and extracting the sections. The last section of the core was where the object was. Ashford laid the core sections on his board in sequence. He narrated the mineral content as he went, which was his habit. Basalt, copper mineralization at this section, quartz intrusion here, returning to basalt. He was halfway through this narration when he stopped. He did not say anything for a moment. He leaned closer to the board. He turned the last core section in his hands. I was standing about 4 feet from him. I saw what he saw. The object was approximately 22 centimeters long. It was curved, tapering at one end to a point and widening at the other into what appeared to be a fractured base, as though the wider end had been separated from a larger structure by force rather than by cutting. The color was a deep amber brown with darker striations along its length. The surface was smooth and dense, neither porous nor reflective. At the fractured base, the cross-section showed an internal structure, a cortical exterior, dense and hard, surrounding a core material that was lighter in color and appeared finely laminated in a way I associated with organic growth rather than mineral deposition. It was bone, or something sufficiently similar to bone that the distinction required laboratory equipment to determine. I have held a great deal of core samples in 15 years. I know what mineral inclusion in rock looks like. I know what fossilized plant material looks like, because it appears regularly in sedimentary cores and has a specific texture and internal structure that I can recognize. This was not either of those things. This had the internal structure of an organic material that had retained its original architecture within the matrix of the surrounding rock. The specific organic material it resembled was the dense bone or horn of a large animal, and it was curved in a way that suggested a specific geometry. The taper, the inner face of the curve, the way the wide end had fractured clean. I did not say the word at the time, but the word that occurred to me was claw. Nobody spoke for approximately 10 seconds after Ashford picked it up. Then Ashford began talking. He said the color was consistent with silicification of organic material under pressure. He said the internal lamination could be explained by differential mineral replacement during fossilization. He said that under sufficient burial conditions, plant root structures could develop a dense cortex that resembled bone. He said these things quickly, in the measured tone of his professional assessments, but he said them at a pace I associate with a person who is covering the distance between themselves and something that has alarmed them. Vince, standing to my right, said, "That is not a plant root." Ashford said he would need to examine it in his hut. Gerald watched Ashford carry the object to the geologist's hut. Then he turned to us and said we should resume drilling. He wrote something in his notebook. I watched him write. He wrote for longer than a short log entry requires. That evening, Ashford came to the cookhouse at supper and said he would need laboratory analysis before making any assessment. He said this carefully. Gerald asked him to lock the object in his equipment chest until the next supply run, 8 days away. Ashford agreed. Gerald made another entry in his notebook. Tommy asked me privately, when Ashford had left, whether I thought it was what he thought it was. I asked him what he thought it was. He did not answer directly. He said it was the largest curved thing he had ever seen come out of a drill core, and that the curve went in a specific direction, and that the direction made him think of something specific. He did not say what. I told him to finish his meal. That was the 9th day. I did not know then that the object would never reach any laboratory. The vibrations begin. I woke at some point after midnight on the 10th night. My first thought was that there was a problem with the generator. The bunkhouse floor was vibrating. Not rattling, not shaking.
That's my old bill.
A pulse, low and rhythmic, felt through the mattress and through the soles of my feet when I stood. One pulse, roughly every 4 to 5 seconds. Even, measured. The closest comparison I can give is the feeling of standing near a